Welcome to the Sidebar with a CFP. Pierce the veil on BigLaw Life, career, and money. Hosted by Matt Smith, the tour manager for BigLaw attorneys. You bill in 6-minute increments. Let's get you some of that time back. In each episode, we will have candid conversations about life inside Big Law, the real stuff they don't teach in law school or show in recruiter brochures. This show pulls back the curtain on what it actually feels like to climb the ranks, navigate transitions, and make big decisions in a high-stakes career. You'll hear from partners, associates, and experts across law and finance, each sharing stories, surprises, and strategies for building a life and career that works for you. This isn't a money podcast. It's a Life in Big Law podcast with a CFP in the host chair. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and on our website, concertplanning.com. Now here's the host of Sidebar with a CFP, Pierce the Veil on Big Law Life, Career, and Money podcast, Matt Smith.
Welcome everybody to the Sidebar with the CFP podcast, where we pierce the veil on life as a big law attorney, from life to career to money and everywhere in between. I'm your host, Matt Smith, the tour manager for Big Law attorneys, and my role is to take care of the logistics so that big law rock stars can put on their show. My guest today is Hadeel Abouhasira, business immigration attorney with Holland Knight in Nashville, Tennessee. What's so interesting about Hadeel, though, is how she has taken her interest in personal finance and run with it. In fact, Hadeel has just been awarded the Corient Scholarship through the CFP board as part of her endeavor to earn the Certified Financial Planner designation. Although she can bypass much of the pre-exam coursework due to her law pedigree, Hadeel is elected to go through all of the coursework in an effort to leave no stone unturned. Hadeel is the perfect guest to have on to discuss the intersection of law and finance. Hadeel, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. I'm so excited to have you here because if I want to do a podcast on the intersection of big law, finance, life, career, not only is it wonderful to have a practicing attorney at a big law firm that has gone through some of the career steps, but also we've discussed a lot your passion and personal interest in personal finance. But let's start at the top. What got you interested in law in the first place?
Yeah, so goes back to childhood. I think the story a lot of people have in childhood is, I like to argue and I'm going to grow up and be a lawyer. And that was true for me. My parents told me from a very young age that I love to argue, I love to talk, and one day I would grow up to be an attorney. So sure enough, at age 11, I convinced myself that was my life path, and I never took the foot off the gas after that. I did everything I could to, learn about life in law school. I took courses in high school that had like a legal focus and just kept going until I went to law school when I was 20 years old and graduated at 23. So I really didn't have a break there to see if there was anything else I really loved, but it's all worked out. And I'm happy to fulfill my childhood dream.
I hope you at least took a bar trip or something during that
of course,
time.
yes. Have to travel or I'd lose my mind.
Good. Did you do something amazing? What did you
I went on a cruise after that trip. Finances are low at that point, Matt. Yeah, so it was a little hard to take a huge trip, but I definitely did it.
Oh, I'm familiar. Yeah, I know. Well, so age 11, that's incredible that you knew that advanced. Now, do you have any kind of familial background with law, or what was it that inspired you, do you think?
Yeah, not at all. So there's not a single lawyer in my family on either side, and we have a very big Middle Eastern family on both sides. So no, it was sort of a parents' encouragement, but also coming from a Middle Eastern background, the focus was education. A lot of Middle Eastern folks grow up to be doctors or engineers, and so that was sort of reiterated in my childhood that yeah, you can be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, but those are really your three choices. And again, at that age, what do you really know? And so I said, lawyer, I love to argue. And by, 7th grade career day, I was dressed up in a little suit, carrying a little briefcase, and just had decided that was going to be my life and career. So, yeah, here we are.
That's cool. You had it figured out so early. Most people don't figure it out until much,
Yeah.
much later.
Yeah.
So I know from our previous discussions that when you got into law, you were thinking you would want to go into labor and employment. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I think by law school, labor and employment was sort of what I had hung my hat on. I think, my younger years, I thought, I'm going to be a prosecutor. I'm going to be a divorce attorney, whatever it was, as you
Yeah.
try to figure out what the legal career looks like. But by law school, I sort of thought, I do want to go into a mid or large firm. What are my options? And to me, labor and employment was one of those areas where you had a human element. So there was the litigation, which I thought I wanted to do. Spoiler alert, I don't and hated it. But at that time, I thought, what could I do that had a really human element that touched on people and real problems, and how, I could actually work with a human being and making hopefully their lives better versus a corporation. That just wasn't an interest of mine. So labor and employment was what I had initially, started to hang my hat on at that point.
Yeah. And then, like most things, that my experience working with big law attorneys is that you have your plan, and then that all kind of gets thrown out the window early on when it started, just because everything is so hectic and chaotic. And so tell me about what it was like when you got started, the kind of work you were doing, and where you're going now.
Yeah, so my journey started at a mid-sized firm in Richmond, and so we were about 250-ish lawyers. There is a summer associate program. I think most law students who want to go into private practice go through on-campus interviews and getting a position for your second summer in law school. And so when I was doing that summer internship, I expressed my interest in labor and employment, and ultimately got an offer at the end of the summer, which is what everybody wants at the end of the summer, is an offer to come back. So,
way to go.
Yeah, way to go. Worked out.
Yeah.
And then when I actually started the role a year or so later, it was presented as a 80% labor and employment, 80% immigration, 20% labor and employment sort of hybrid role, which I had done some immigration work during that summer, and I enjoyed it. It was fine. But it ended up being that immigration was just really busy at that time, and turns out I loved it. You want to talk human element, that is about as close to a human element in mid-size to big law that you can get. So I'm glad it worked out the way that it did. And it does, immigration does have some labor and employment elements to it, but I don't have to go to court and I don't have to litigate. And so honestly, it couldn't have worked out better.
Yeah. So you thought you wanted to maybe go to the litigation side, maybe, I mean, that sounds like you had kind of a few ideas in mind going through law school, and then you found yourself working on immigration law. And maybe dive a little bit deeper about what kind of work you're doing and what motivates you and what's inspiring about that.
Yeah, so I'm a second generation immigrant. My parents came to the United States as asylees. And at that time, I knew that my parents, weren't born and raised in the US, obviously, but they had told me sort of from teenage to adulthood, you should be an immigration lawyer. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. They're laughing at me now when they see that. But anyway, so the background was always there for the immigration, the personal connection, the history, the desire to help people navigate, coming to a new world. But in mid-size to big law, immigration is not, asylum and removal hearings, or, the stuff that you see on the news. What I do is business immigration. So I help mostly employers, companies, investors get work visas to come to the United States, stay in the United States, whether that be permanent, whether it be temporary. So my work is exclusively focused on business immigration, with a small touch of a family case here and there when somebody gets married or falls in love with someone who's not American. We'll get those cases, and I really enjoy them too.
But that sounds nice. Some of the good stories, it sounds like, on the personal level.
Yeah.
So what are Yeah. So what are some of the trends and things that you're seeing in the business immigration side of things? Like you mentioned, we see all sorts of stuff on the personal side in the news and everything, but what's going on in your world?
Yeah, in my it's been a busy several months to say the least. There are a lot of employers I think that are a bit nervous. You see on the news things about ICE raids, and that's a big deal for our corporate clients. We do a lot of healthcare focused work here
Mm,
in Nashville at the Nashville Holland Knight office, and so there's a lot of, I think, fear, concern about ICE raids, ICE audits. So that's really a lot of what takes up my time. On the other hand, companies need their global talent, especially these large multinational companies. They want to bring people over. So it hasn't necessarily slowed down. I think it's just been um, sort of dealing with more stringent requirements that maybe aren't made public on the front end, but we're learning on the back end that there's a bit more scrutiny and there's a bit more pushback on things that may have otherwise been, easy to get through in other times. So it's
yeah.
it hasn't slowed down by any means.
Right, right. But it sounds like there's maybe a little bit more reassurance and hand holding and things
Yeah,
like that for corporate clients that are just trying to make sure they're doing the right thing. And
absolutely. A lot of preventative sort of conversations, a lot of concerns, and just sort of dealing with that from both the employer and employee side. So it's been an interesting time, but we went through this administration, and that's the fun thing about immigration. I've been practicing since 2015, and so every 4 years it changes, and you
yeah,
just sort of roll with the punches and see what you can do.
yeah, life and law, they're always evolving,
Yeah,
it seems. Well, so
absolutely.
let's talk about on the personal side. You and I originally connected because you'd taken an interest in personal finance and really seemed to know your stuff and have gone on to be awarded the scholarship, the Corient Scholarship from the CFP board. Can you talk a little bit about what got you interested in personal finance?
Yeah, I thought about this, and it wasn't something I've been interested in my whole life by any means. I think coming out of law school at 23 years old and being handed a salary, at that level, I didn't know what I was doing. And for years, I didn't know what I was doing. And then I met my husband, my now husband, and he had dreams of a really big life. And I thought, wow, I have a lot of loans and I, have this career trajectory where I can stand to make, great money
Hmm.
and a long time to do it. So, what do we really want to do and how can we build our lives together in a way that fulfills both of our goals and dreams? And so that's sort of when the personal finance bug really hit me.
Sure.
And I started teaching myself a lot about investing. I was reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of podcasts. I got my real estate license because, as we've talked about with the CFP board and getting that certification, I'm somebody who, when I want to learn something, kind of need an end goal and a test, right, to get me to sit down and study because it's not like I have,
Yeah,
many free hours during the week. So having sort of an end goal in mind is something that has pushed me and motivated me to learn more. And so I think that's sort of where it started was, okay, here I am at, age whatever, late 20s. I really need to figure out what I'm doing with my finances and my loans and make sure I'm, putting myself in a position to really live the life I want to live. So that's where it started.
yeah, it's incredible. I can tell you from my side of the table that those of us that have gone through the CFP program, usually we have some sort of financial services role as our day job during the daytime, and it still takes us 1 to 3 years to go through that program. So it's really quite amazing that you're able and willing to take it on and give up so much of your personal time to go do that and learn everything. You mentioned student loans. That is a huge topic for virtually everyone I speak with. Can you talk a little bit about how it felt to be in that position where you've come out of law school, you're about to embark on this career, you have these high, I call them sticker price salaries, where you have these high income numbers, and yet oftentimes maybe you don't feel quite as confident as you would like to just because of the burden of the law school debt.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, Matt, like looking back, at 19 years old, when I agreed, I'm going to go to law school and I signed off on my first set of student loans, I had no idea what I was doing. During those 3 years, that's what I was living off of. And I spent pretty frivolously because it was just money sitting there and I didn't know any better. So I candidly graduated with $220,000 in student loan debt, and I'm 10 years out of law school now. And I ended up refinancing late last year, into a private student loan just to, I just want to get it done, because it does sort of feel like shackles. You're always sort of stuck when you have this huge burden, kind of holding you back from fulfilling other dreams and goals that you might have. So I wish I knew then what I know now about student loans and how interest works, and what that sticker price actually means for your future. And not that I have any regrets. I'm so glad I went to the school that I went to. I'm so glad that I did everything I did and learned from it. But in my position now, looking back, I would love to teach other people, law students who are coming out of school, especially women, especially women of color. Hey, let's talk about what it looks like to pay off your student loans, or let's, talk about what it looks like to make a budget or invest, or, just whatever those goals are for your future, so you can not be 10 years out looking back and thinking, wow, I am still shackled by this 6-figure debt. It's a student loans are no joke, but
it's interesting because a lot of times in my world, somebody might introduce me to another person as a financial advisor, and it irks me a little bit because I think, well, they're going to think I'm like the investments guy, and that's like what I care about. But usually when working with big law attorneys, like a huge focus of what we're doing is talking about student loans and kind of early life stages things. You mentioned you just got married and all that kind of stuff. Balancing the student loan burden can be a real headache. Even if the mathematics says we should do one thing about the payments, a lot of times what makes you sleep better at night is really addressing the student loans aggressively and things like that. So it's a common refrain that I hear. And even that introductory student loan balance, that's pretty common for people that I'm working with. So you just got married, and you have not let the student loans hold you back in life, and you're doing other things. How have you felt, and how have you handled balancing that kind of stuff? The student loan burden, as well as, getting married, achieving other early life goals, saving for retirement, things like that.
Yeah. Well, I have a great budget spreadsheet that my husband hates. I did get to a point where for me it made sense to, make a spreadsheet and track every dollar and have a zero-based budget, so that I knew I'm an optimizer. I want to make sure that my dollars are all working for me. And someone said something to me in my early years of practice about always paying yourself first, and that stuck with me. So that is a big part of my personal financial life and introduction to marriage, is balancing our finances together, making sure we have both of our goals sort of on that spreadsheet and accounted for. But to be honest, my student loans take up a huge part of that budget, and he's also an attorney and came out with 6 figures of student loan debt, but he works for the government, and at a time where public student loan forgiveness is still an option. So we're just on a bit of different paths here, but I think it's really important to, think about that early in your career. Some people will take the position that I'm going to live like I did in law school and put all my money towards loans. And that's great. I didn't do that. I did not even come close to doing that. And some people will do the opposite and be so happy, they're making a great income, at such an early age, and not even think about their student loans, and it'll get paid when
It's so hard to do that. I mean, you've worked as hard as you've worked. I mean, really, like you said, you figured it out at age 11 and you started getting towards that goal. I'm sure you're the top of your class in every academic setting that you were in, to land in the seat that you're in. And once you get out of law school, you've got the job. You've reached that, what you thought might be a mountaintop, and turns out like just another hill, and there's probably more to go after later. But Yeah,
Absolutely.
no, it's not surprising at all. And I commend you for the work you've done and getting to where you are. Have there been any sort of aha moments as it relates to your knowledge of personal finance and your career? Things like, um, this sounds trite, but maybe things like understanding your benefit options a little bit better, the 401k at work, and how best to prioritize savings goals and that sort of thing.
Yeah, yes, we could talk all day about all the things I've learned. So, I think CFPs are phenomenal. Obviously, I'm happy to study to be one and love working with you. But I will also say at the time, all I knew was asset under management, financial
Mhm.
professionals. And so that was sort of what I did early on. And there are great ones out there. But learning about how assets under management work and how, those fees are paid and accumulated and how you really don't ever feel them, that was a huge turning point for me.
Yeah.
Um, Thankfully, at a time where I didn't have too much in investments and those fees really weren't making a huge difference on my long term goals. But that was probably the first thing where I said, "Oh, this isn't what I have to do." The other thing when I learned about, not to get too into investments, but learning about ETFs and what
Yeah.
the S&P 500 meant and what expense ratios were. Once I learned that you can just invest in these buckets
Hmm.
um, of different companies and pay these really low expense ratios, that was also a huge turning point for me because it pushed me to really learn, why does investing seem so scary? And I think it's meant to sort of make you feel that way in
Exactly.
some ways. Yeah, but it's not. And so, but it took learning that, right? And when I talk to a lot of people now about finances and investing, especially women and women in law, they don't talk to us about it. This isn't stuff you learn in school, right? You learn case law and you learn how to argue and think like a lawyer, but you don't learn business, finance, investments, and finance is personal. Like we've been
Mhm.
saying, it is what sort of feels best for you. So I'd say those are two big things. Understanding benefits is a big one, although benefits are complicated.
Yeah.
But, I know I've talked to you about long-term disability insurance and Roth versus traditional 401ks. So all those things are things that I think 5 years ago, I couldn't tell you what they meant. And I didn't know what I was actually doing with my money. But
Yeah.
now I feel so comfortable with how everything is sort of planned out. And I have a good grasp on, my income, my expenses, my investments, my savings. And then I have, for me, even though I feel very comfortable, somebody like you that I can say, hey, Matt, tell me, what does this look like 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now? Are we on the right track? So I think it's always, a learning.
Yeah, and I think where
Area.
you've been able to, I mean, I think it's an understatement to say increase your knowledge, but I'm sure it brings a lot of confidence and a little bit more comfort and security with just the trajectory of things. And yes, we may have some student loan balances right now, but we can see what we're doing on our way to handle that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you touched on it. My industry is set up in a way that it overcomplicates virtually everything. And I think it's a sales tactic in most cases. And because I work with big law attorneys, every one of my clients is smart enough to understand all this stuff if they were just ever taught it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I have to impress upon people is sometimes they will think, well, this seems so simple. What you're saying seems so simple that I must not get it. And I'm like, no, you get it. That's it. That's all there is to it. Everything else you hear about this is fluff and unnecessary. And I think that can be a relief. I think the more educated you are on what you're doing and why, then the more confident and secure you can feel.
Absolutely. And I think it comes down to just understanding that we just weren't taught it, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're dumb. It doesn't mean you can't learn it or get a grasp on it. There are great professionals out there who can help you and will help you, and you can pay them hourly. They don't have to take, there's help out there. And I think, one other talked about aha moments, but life insurance was a big one. And one I see, amongst my colleagues just on this floor where, where I'm sitting right now is, well, I was sold this whole life insurance policy and I don't know what it means. And I'm like, oh my God. But
Yeah.
don't feel bad because no one taught us this stuff. And so that's what I think really has pushed me from, oh, how do I, live the life and dream I want, to how can I educate myself in a way where I can also pass that information on to people in my industry. And, we've talked about this. I love personal finance, but I love my job. I love my career. I want to stay in big law. I love immigration. But at the same time, if someone comes into my office and wants to talk about personal finance, I light up. I'm so happy to help. And I'm so happy to sit here and just talk to you about your goals, because it means you're taking a step towards learning, towards, bettering your future, towards planning for the future. And oftentimes those are the women on this floor. Someone says, well, so-and-so talked to you about XYZ. Do you mind if we talk about X? Yes, of course. Let me tell you everything I know so that you can feel more prepared. And I think it's just really important to maintain that level of openness and education, and making sure you don't, make people feel dumb, because it's totally reasonable that you don't know this stuff.
Right, of course. Well, yeah. And so in that vein, what's kind of on the horizon for you in Big Law, and how do you hope things go, see things go from here?
Yeah, well, it's going to be really embarrassing if it doesn't work out, Matt, but I'm up for partner this year. So hopefully hopefully by, December, January, we'll have an answer on that. And that's really the goal professionally, is to make partner, eventually to make equity partner, which, if you're in Big Law and you're listening to this, the difference between an income partner and an equity partner and what the differences are. But, I love what I do. I'm happy to continue to do it. Professionally, like, this is fun. Some days are really hard and stressful, but this is one of the most rewarding fields of law I think I could have imagined getting into. But at the same time, in my personal time, I do a lot of work, some volunteer work with the YWCA, which is all about empowering women. So my personal goals and hobbies, if you will, surround how can I help women? How can I help them learn and understand and feel confident in how, they earn and spend and save their money. And so I don't know what that aspect looks like. And I don't know what sort of time I have for that, to be honest with you, especially as I continue elevating in this career. But for me, just getting that education and that foundational knowledge is great. And if that, happens to be one conversation a month or a year that I have with a colleague or a new lawyer, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But I think ultimately my sort of life goal and mission here, is to be somebody who can empower women to feel confident with money.
Yeah, well, no, it's your enthusiasm is certainly easy to pick up, and it's admirable. And crossing fingers for the partnership election forthcoming. This is our first episode. We have exactly 0 listeners to start with, but hopefully by early next year, we'll have a crowd of people that are waiting and in the wings, hoping to applaud you. And
thank you.
And whether it's the partnership or all the other good work you're doing, it's really incredible. So I appreciate you being here as my introductory guest. Where should people find you online? Should they go to the Holland Knight website, or where are you most easily found?
Yeah, there are not many Hadeel Abouhasiras in this world. So I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, but definitely on Holland Knight's website. I live and die by my email. So I'm very easy to reach by my work email, and happy to help in any way I can.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Hadeel. Really appreciate you being here on the inaugural episode. And I think it was a wonderful time. And hopefully we'll have you on again later as a partner.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure being here.
Great.
You've been tuning into Sidebar with a CFP. Pierce the veil on Big Law Life, Career, and Money with Matt Smith. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and on our website, concertplanning.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others. The contents of this podcast are purely intended to be general and educational in nature and should not be construed as specifically tailored investment, financial planning, tax, legal, or other professional advice. Any investment performance referenced is purely past performance, which is no guarantee of any future performance. Nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as an offer to sell, a solicitation of an offer to buy, or a recommendation of any security or other financial product or investment strategy. All investment, tax, and financial planning strategies involve risk that you should be prepared to bear. You are highly encouraged to consult with professionals of your choosing before taking any action based on the contents of this podcast. To the extent the guest on this podcast was a client of Concert Financial Planning as of the date of the recording, the guest was not compensated for their time. Nothing conveyed by the guest should be construed as a testimonial or endorsement of Concert Financial Planning, and their experience as an investor or a client may not be representative of all investors or clients.